Hey guys, so I thought I might try a new style of video on this channel. As some of you may have possibly detected, those of you that have been subscribed to this channel for some length of time, I'm looking to sort of do more with this channel, but I've almost hit a Mexican standoff with myself. And it's like there are so many, avenues I could take this channel. There's so much I want to do with it. And I'm almost sort of paralyzed by just the amount of possibilities. So I'm going to start trying ideas, and this is one of them. So if you've clicked on this video, which you have, I assume, thanks for giving this idea a shot. So this is like a commentary style of video that I'm going to do. I don't know how often I'm going to do it. It might turn out that I'm going to do them once every sort of X number of videos goes up, or maybe it might be once a week, once a month, whatever. And it's just going to be where I sort of read out some of your comments and sort of discuss, do a bit of follow-up, talk about maybe correct some errors that I've made in previous videos, talk a little bit about the channel, give you any sort of updated information, some like small news that wouldn't make it into a video in and of itself. So if you're like watching this on a desktop or something, just like switch to another tab, start surfing around. There's not going to be too much of a visual display on this video. Okay, so the first video is the one where I talk about Shred, which is a command line app pick that I decided that I was going to show on the channel, which is, so it's a command line tool that basically let you take a hard drive and then just completely shred it, wipe it, so that it would be safe to sell secondhand or hand out, so that there's no like residual information left on it. So a comment from Noah, and there's going to be a lot of mispronunciations on this series, so I apologize profusely in advance. But Noah Desua says, warns to do not use this on an SSD or any flash device. It will not work and will be bad for your drive. So I double checked this, and because of the way SSDs work, and because they work obviously different to like spinny disk optical drives, also like the regular old SATA drives, using Shred normally, like how I demonstrated in the video, it was specifically for your standard like hard drives. If you were to use it on an SSD, it's still worth doing according to what judging from what I've read and the research I've done. But you only ever need to do one iteration of it. So it would be Shred -- iterations equals one, and then / device / and then the hard drive you wanted to, the device you wanted to wipe. But I must say that there is opinion is very much divided on that particular issue as to not only how like secure it is, whether or not it's overkill, but also how much it damages the SSDs. SSDs are like getting sort of better and better as time goes on now, to the point where they seem to have superseded optical drives, SATA drives in in absolute, but I'm not 100% certain on that. Zunius Zoo asks, does this work on a partition / drive level only, or can you specify folders to wipe? You can use it on specific folders, but it only really works under certain file systems. Check the help file, check the man pages. So just like go to the command line and type man space shred, and you'll get the you'll get what it can do and what it can't do. But with journal in file systems, which are like your standard ext3 and ext4 file systems, which my computers are on, it doesn't apparently work very well, or it's of limited usefulness, is what it says in the man pages. So take that for what you will. They say that the only 100% way to make sure the data is completely removed from a drive is to make sure that it's like physically destroyed, because apparently, according to a few blogs that I've read up on, what can happen is that there can be like data stored. That data becomes bad sectors. Those bad sectors then get cordoned off, so that sort of information is almost always preserved there as bad sectors rather than being properly wiped, and in theory is recoverable. I don't know how far into sort of the academic discussion we're getting here, so I'll move on now. Okay, so the next video is the one where I talk about the Epiphany browser, which I came back to because I sort of tried out the Epiphany browser years ago before I was making YouTube videos, and I thought that it was a pretty good stand-in as a Firefox substitute, but Firefox was just kind of better, so I kind of, disregarded this. But I came back to it now that it's built into GTK3, and of course Firefox is quite famously still on GTK2 now. So it is interesting. And also, of course, the web browser is specifically designed for Linux, whereas Mozilla Firefox is it really is designed as a cross-platform browser, but it does focus on Windows more than it does focus on Linux. And of course, if that's where the majority of its user base is, you can't fault them too much for that. But this is a browser from the eyes of a Linux distribution, or with a Linux desktop in mind, and it feels more natural. It feels like it blends into the desktop a little bit more, and it looks a bit nicer. So Ultraviolet asks, can you import bookmarks into it? You can. You just export your bookmarks into the HTML file, as you would do with Firefox and Chrome, and you can import it. I tried it out specifically. Chris Creations says they should really add extensions. The thing about GNOME is that it's very customizable once you install a bunch of extensions. The browser doesn't have them. If the browser doesn't have them, if it had extensions, then I'd probably use this over the others. It doesn't have extensions or add-ons. And the problem with a lot of these smaller browsers, the ones that are basically not Firefox or Chrome, is that you're going to have trouble getting add-on support and those add-ons, being maintained. So when it comes to things like list, I don't really know the best sort of course of action for when it comes to add-on frameworks. As I understand it, there is a standardization in process. I believe that Firefox are eventually going to make it so that you can run Chrome add-ons on the Firefox browser, and I suppose in theory that framework could be carried across to other to Epiphany, the Epiphany browser. So, but the thing is, GNOME is customizable, but it's kind of not designed to be customizable, if you know what I mean. Like if you just had a vanilla GNOME desktop, you wouldn't be able to change the themes, and you wouldn't be able to change a lot of the you wouldn't be able to change the orientation of any of the panels or anything like that. And it's only when you install the GNOME Tweak tool that you sort of add the advanced level features there, which seem to me to seem the more sort of hackish way of doing it. But then again, of course, the GNOME desktop, I have often said that there are specific advantages for not having customizability on flagship distributions because it can intimidate new users. Your average new user isn't going to know the difference between a Mate and a Cinnamon desktop. They're just going to want anything that's easy to use and that can get up and go. And I think that the GNOME desktop does a pretty damn good job of that in its vanilla form, to be honest. It's a little resource heavy, which is why I don't use it, but I think that it has some pretty good upsides to it. So the Epiphany web browser is the browser that sort of naturally fits into the GNOME environment. And since the GNOME environment, it doesn't have extensions, the GNOME extensions, I think, are they're part. It's you would need to install the GNOME Tweak tool first, so it So it strikes me that if customizability is what you want out of a desktop environment, then there might be better ones to go for, like Mate or XFCE or even KDE. But that being said, I'm sure many of you will disagree with me. I'm sure many of you will and you'll probably be right if we're completely honest. But yeah, onto extensions. I think the thing about Epiphany is it seems to be going for minimalism. It also seems to be going for there's also this argument, and the Tor browser uses this argument, that the more extensions that you install, the less secure your browser becomes. Which is why I particularly like on the Mozilla add-on store, they tell you the license, and they tend to make it easier to link to the source code on the Mozilla browser extensions, not so much on the Chrome, obviously. but but yeah, like the Tor browser says, don't install additional add-ons, because unless you've like reviewed the source code or whatever, there's a possibility that there could be, there could be hidden keyloggers in there. There could be hidden Bitcoin miners in there. There could be all kinds of things hidden. You could be used as a node for something, or something, something to do with BitTorrenting, I'd imagine. Yeah, so to basically lock off the add-on, the extension kind of framework, especially if you're a browser with a limited development sort of department with a limited number of people working on it, it does strike me as actually being the safer option to just not have extensions and not have an extension framework, and just have that ensured stability. I would like them to have had a few more privacy features, maybe the ability to manipulate JavaScript a little bit more. I could make that criticism against all browsers though, and they do let you, like, perhaps maybe an option to let you delete your cookies on exit or something, to or possibly on the close of the tab. But there you go. I from what I'm not a programmer by any stretch of the imagination, but it does seem that the add-on framework seem to be particularly difficult. Seem to, they seem to require like a lot more work, and a lot more people to work on them. David Ack says, I need something like Ghostry uBlock Privacy Badger. If they would add this next to ad blocking, it would become my default browser. You'll try it on the new Elementary OS beta. I like that Elementary OS have decided to adopt it as their primary browser. I think that it would work very well in the framework of their distribution. But you are right. Just like uBlock, for example, or the ability to add lists. Filter lists would be a great one as well, because then you could just get some filter lists or use the ones that uBlock use, and then use them. So like the ability to implement block lists would be good for the most part. Like a built-in privacy badger would be amazing. But again, you're sort of the issue is on the for the most part is on the end of the developers for the add-ons. And if you're going to develop an add-on for as wide a use as possible, you're probably not going to get that many people using it if you develop it for a small browser over a Firefox or a Chrome. Unfortunately, it's it's a problem we've had time immemorial. Oh yes, and of course, Peter Botha says, for what it's worth, Firefox Developer Edition also allows processes per tabs, and it performs very well. That is true. Although when I have tried it, and the beta version of it is obviously gonna not be as polished and smoothed out. It didn't perform as well as I'd like, but it did perform better than it could have, I guess, is what I'm trying to say there. I think sometimes it's still sort of slowed the browser down a little bit more, but you could, by contrast, then just switch into another tab a little bit more easier, since the processes were separate. What else have we got here? Okay, no, Spencer Brown asks, will I be doing Reconk next? It's pretty much the KDE equivalent to Epiphany. For a long time, it was really crusty, but over the last couple of months, it's gotten a lot more stable. I've even started using it as my main browser. That's quite interesting. I was certainly thinking of doing Konqueror. I'm just trying to think about doing it in the right forum, because of course, my daily driver is Manjaro XFCE edition, and that probably isn't going to showcase Qt apps in the best way. Maybe if I had a virtual machine with a KDE desktop in it, I could do that. I would certainly have a look at the feature set, because Konqueror and Reconk, I would consider doing both. The feature set of Konqueror is pretty good, actually. It's a lot more than Epiphany. So I imagine Reconk is like the lightweight version of Konqueror then. Davon Jones asks, can I take a look at Remix OS? I think I will be looking on it about it. It is it is on the list, but it's not top of the list. And then Paper 9 Ol says that Epiphany is very buggy. Yes, I've actually had even though the build that I reviewed for the video did not crash on me, and it seems to have gotten a lot stabler lately, I certainly feel that the Epiphany browser of years ago is certainly not as stable as Chrome, for example. But I think that now the Epiphany browser, I don't think it crashed on me at all. So it seems like the stability is improving. Okay, so the next video I talk about browsing the web without JavaScript. So using add-ons like NoScript or uMatrix to just turn off JavaScript by default and then maintaining a whitelist. So yeah, a lot of very interesting, very insightful comments on this one. Ultraviolet said, surely just disabling the third-party cookies is the default way forward. It seems that works the best. That seems to be the best balance between usability and security. Especially, it stops the worst culprits, definitely. The scorecard research and all those kind of people. But if you are on Firefox or Chromium or Chrome, I would still advise at least using a privacy badger, and maybe even in addition something like Disconnect or possibly some of the lists from uBlock, which can stop malicious code from being run on websites. I, at the moment, am still currently just allowing first-party Java and first-party cookies. And then I've got, uMatrix as a whitelist. No, just even first-party Java. Because you only ever really need cookies on websites that you log into, of which, so you can it's easy enough to whitelist those as you go. You just whitelist as you make an account for a site. And then with JavaScript, it's just first-party JavaScript. And for the most part, that seems to be all right. There's one or two websites that don't look great. If I want to play a video on something, I usually have to either play the video through YouTube or whitelist as well. It's not too much of a hassle once it becomes part of your routine. It's a bit like driving a stick shift in the sense that you are shifting gears multiple times during a journey, quite a lot, but you do it so often that it becomes part of the whole driving routine. Someone who I can't pronounce says that they tried browsing with NoScript and it broke so many sites that they couldn't bother. Yeah, I can kind of imagine that now. I mean, that's why I feel that I've got to browse with first-party JavaScript turned on. I think it's a real shame in a way, because a lot of the time it's not needed. The JavaScript just isn't needed, and it's about using, it's not having unnecessary bells and whistles, and it's not, like a simple HTML page will do in the vast majority of cases, rather than anything, unnecessarily fancy with JavaScript. CSS is different because CSS is convenient, and it allows for a much more consistent layout of websites, and it actually reduces the workload by a lot, and there's no effect on security or anything like that. But for the most part, with JavaScript, it's such a powerful language that that you can you can do it. It can a lot can be done with it, and sometimes it's just nice to put safety locks on it, I guess. I turn off Java. I can't actually, to be honest, I can't even remember the last time I used Java. Hamek Bajusha. Sorry if I mispronounced that. MPV for the win. MPV, for those of you that don't know, is it's a new media player that's doing the rounds. It's really good. It's a very minimalist one, very lightweight, but it works a treat. MPV. It's available in the Manjaro repositories. I think it's available in Ubuntu 16.04. So yeah, get that. That's really good. It doesn't even use like a GTK or Qt toolkit. It just runs in a single. Install it and run it and see for yourself, or just look it up on YouTube. It's great. It's definitely worth a look. Someone else uses Chromium with script block, which kind of makes a lot of sense as well. And also a shout out to the Great Suspender, which is a great Firefox add-on. I don't know if there's a Chrome version. Basically, it earmarks your tabs but doesn't load them. So it saves up a bit of memory so that it lets you keep, like, it looks like the tab is open, but the website has since been cleared, and then you click on that tab again. And that happens like once you've not visited that tab for X amount of time. You can set the amount of time. It's really good if you want to save some memory. Okay, so like judging from like most of the comments on the video, and there are quite a lot to go through, most of you have pretty diverse setups. So there's not, but many of you do block JavaScript by default with an add-on like NoScript. And then just sort of, use that. And the thing I like about NoScript is that it allows you to put like just that one button up in your interface for Firefox, where it just says temporarily allow all on this page, and it's one button, and it temporarily adds whatever site you're on to the whitelist, and then automatically refreshes it. And that actually makes it really quite convenient to have NoScript on there. Many of you just stick with the Privacy Badger, Disconnect, Ghostry. I personally don't advocate using Ghostry because, first of all, it's not open source. And when it comes to security, you can really only 100% trust open source. And there are enough open source options there for you to be safe. There is an open source option for security every single time. Because people that know a lot, a damn sight lot more about it than I do, swear by open source. When it comes to things like security, especially when you're talking about home security and things where you don't have like professional teams of people constantly auditing stuff. Squeaky Pancakes mentions Light, which is a browser that I've only seen once. It's in the BSPWM build of Manjaro, which is a surprisingly good build for something as obscure as it is. Because I've never heard of the BSP window manager, and I'm actually currently looking through it for a review now, for a review video for this channel. And yeah, that's gonna be an interesting review video. You guys want to check that one out, or even just check out the window manager as well. But yeah, it comes with Light by default, which is basically a version of Firefox that's lighter, and it looks really good. But I don't see it very often, and I don't know if it's because it's new. It looks very, very Firefoxy to the point where it almost looks like it could be made by Mozilla. I don't know if it is, but it does look like a good browser. Cubzilla rather, also looks like quite a good browser. Matthew Simplay turns off JavaScript with a whitelist just for the performance benefit. There is, yes, the performance benefit is pretty good actually. Like, there is so much wasted JavaScript on websites that you can make a decent performance boost. I would love that option on tablets. That would be an amazing option to have on tablets, to turn off JavaScript, because that would be where I think you make the most saving. You'd probably save a fair amount on battery as well. But yeah, so most of you do seem to have a pretty diverse one, but you seem to be conscious of it. Now, I've got to say that this is a bit more. There's a bit of I don't know, selection bias, the right one, or volunteer bias, where the kinds of people that are going to be leaving a comment discussing this are automatically, by definition, going to be engaged with the subject and aware of the situation. So, but if I ask the man on the street, do you, like, most people don't even use any browser extensions at all, I think I remember reading somewhere. So, if you're listening to this and you're watching that video, the chances are you're probably more in the know than most people. But, most of you are. So, the next video is my Elementary OS review. And I've got to say, the review that I gave before Elementary wasn't really that great. It wasn't really that shining. But I reviewed it, the latest one that came up, which was Elementary 0.4 low-key beta. So I had a look at the beta. Got to admit, very stable for a beta. Very stable for a beta. It looks really nice. It looks really, really consistent design. It looks great. It looks like and it's not customizable. So it looks like you know, it would be a very good candidate if someone had a laptop and they came to me and said, Chris, put Linux on this. I don't want anything too fancy. I just want to do the basics. Like, I gotta say, elementary Mint would be my usual go-to, and judging from what I've seen from the Mint betas as well, the Mate version in particular, but it generally looks like it's going to be pretty good. You know, Mint is as Mint does. Mint is XP for the current day. However, Elementary OS seems to be like Linux that's just really, really easy to use. It doesn't even try and... It's kind of got a slightly Mac-esque outline, but really that's the immediate, you know, sort of superficial is really where it ends. And I gotta say, it seemed consistent. It seemed stable. It seemed like there was a lot of care and attention gone into it. And I think, to me, it gives a really good first impression for newcomers to Linux, and that's what I was looking for in this distribution, and that's what I found. So, comments. There is an elementary tweak thing that you can install. It's an unofficial app, but it integrates quite well to the system. So even if you are a bit more of a power user, a bit more experienced with Linux, and you want a little bit more customizability at your system, there is an option. So, which I expect there would have been. Xanaris Falador, and I apologize if I've mispronounced your name, says that the elementary devs have done an outstanding job with this distribution. Bravo. True words, you have. So a lot of you are, generally speaking, pretty well, pretty highly of Elementary OS. There's not really much you can really diss about it, other than maybe the elementary desktop might require a little bit more memory and a little bit more graphical power than you really want out of an older machine. So I wouldn't necessarily put it on an older machine. I'd go with something like Lubuntu, the LXDE version of Ubuntu. That works really well on the lighter machines. But for this, as something that you'd really want to show off, this is pretty good. David P asks, do I have any plans to look at Solus OS? It is on the list. It's one that is on the list, and it will be coming up soon, but there are a couple that are before it. And when I say it's on, like, it's really, like, how I do videos is kind of interesting in a way that, like, when I say it's on the list, it means that I'm going to try and make a video about it, but in a lot of cases, videos do actually get scrapped mid-process. So, for example, it could be that I might consider giving an overly negative review on a piece of software or something, or a distribution, when I really don't want to. You know, like, when it comes to open source software, since, you know, it is a community effort, and since a lot of open source software is developed by, like, volunteers and open source by the goodwill of the community, coming along and talking shit is really something that it's not classy to do. It's not classy to do. So I try and keep as much of my reviews and stuff like that as on the positive side as possible. And if something isn't positive, I will generally scrap it rather than if it doesn't, as long as it doesn't, like, make any situations worse. I generally won't mention it at all, just to sort of stay out of it, and also as well to give it a chance to improve. Like, if I sort of shared my opinion, a negative opinion of the Epiphany browser a couple of years ago, then it would clash with now that the Epiphany browser has improved, that information was that old opinion was still be, people are still watching videos on this channel from 2 years ago. So I try and keep it positive. It just makes things a lot more easier. And again, I don't want to go around sort of making enemies as well. I don't want to discourage people from like engaging in the community, and I want to keep this place as possible, as positive as possible. There's space for, like, healthy criticism, of course, but and I hope that there is some of that on this channel. But there's that, and then there's just being a dick, I guess. But and so occasionally, if I feel like I'm being too harsh on a piece of software, then I'll scrap a video, or for any number of other reasons. Sometimes it just like there's not a good way to get a review out for it. But yeah, a lot of you seem to be pretty big fans of this. Will Seven Vin says that they're a programmer and really enjoy using it after a bit of a distro hop. So fair enough. Fair enough. I paint this as a distribution that's very newbie friendly because it does look very newbie friendly to me, and they make a lot of they make a lot of correct decisions in terms of the little things. So I don't think of it as a programmer or power user distribution, but considering that it has, and there's another question down here that kind of relates to this. Someone asks, "I'm a programmer. Do you recommend this distribution?" So basically, Elementary OS and Linux Mint OS both have the Ubuntu repositories to draw from, which means that basically it's a pretty good all-purpose distribution. So I'm not a programmer, but it does seem like if you need certain tools, you'll find those tools there if you'll find them on Ubuntu. Alexander says that he wants to point out a few things. The App Center is brand new in Loki, so it's the very first version of it. But it works damn well. Yes, it was. I was very much impressed with it. It was simple, it was straightforward, easy to use. Nice. And every single default app has notifications built in. So, for example, if you type sudo apt upgrade and switch your focus window to a web browser, once the command finishes its execution, you'll get a desktop notification that it's done. And that is nice. And you've got a bell icon in the top right, which you can see the notifications that you've missed. That's nice. Okay. The panel at the top also matches the background image. So if you've got a dark background, the text will be white. If you've got a light background, the text will be black or dark. And you will get a nice transparency so that it'll adjust to your wallpaper so that you can see the text. If there's no need for transparency, the panel becomes completely transparent. Of course, once you have a maximized app, it goes full black automatically. There are already a dozen or 24 third-party apps created specifically for Elementary OS that blend into the system perfectly, like the RSS reader, the To-Do app, the Elementary Tweaks, a podcast app, Twitter client. So the Elementary team developed quite a healthy ecosystem that the developers are happy with. That's pretty cool. So that's basically some things you wanted to point out, and thank you. Yes, so it's things like that that have really sort of have really warmed me to Elementary OS. The thing about it deserves much more exposure than it gets. It really does. Yeah. I'm going to move on now because basically the rest of the comments are you guys praising Elementary OS, I think. But it is, and I always love being surprised by a distribution, pleasantly surprised. And to be honest, I don't know what I was expecting. My review, I think, of 0.3, it was okay. I think I was still adjusting to like client-side decorations and things like that back then. And there was a lot of stuff that seemed a little bit newer, perhaps. So I feel like maybe the 0.3 review, in hindsight, actually, might have been... I don't think I necessarily said it was bad or anything. But I certainly didn't sing its praises as high as I did in that video. But yeah, it's really good. Okay, so the next video, Linux Mint 18, Sarah Matei. First comment from Xanaris Falador. Your explanation of why the codecs are not installed is something I never thought about, but is valid. I believe the explanation given by the Linux Mint devs for not including them was reducing the amount of work in maintaining the distro images. That seemed to be the official explanation, and of course, less work for them is a good thing because you don't want to overburden developers. You want to keep things sustainable, and that means reducing the workload as much as possible. So it makes perfect sense from that point of view. I think they should choose one flagship distribution and move with it. Maybe I think Cinnamon now is got to be basically ready, and they can ditch Mate. I mean, it's got to be confusing for newcomers, the difference between a Mate and a Cinnamon desktop. It's certainly not, that's the thing I like about the elementary OS, is that it does make your decisions for you, and for newcomers that's what you need, and for power users that's definitely what you don't need. So obviously you're striking a balance there. But yeah, so I really liked Linux Mint because it was one of the earlier distributions I used, and I really liked it because it came pre-installed with codecs. It also had very early support for widescreen resolutions out of the box before Ubuntu. Interestingly enough, I think I bought a brand new laptop and I installed Ubuntu on it, and I found to my dismay that it only had 4:3 resolutions for some reason. I don't know if it was a problem with the laptop's hardware or whether or not, but this was when as widescreens were just coming in, and so I tried another distribution because the solutions that I looked for online seemed like basically involved messing around with the Xorg file, which I tried a few times and completely buggered up. So I just thought, you know what, I'm going to try a different distribution. I tried Linux Mint. That looked really polished and nice, and it did work, and it came with codecs out of the box, which really appealed to me, because learning how to install software on Linux was something that was, again, as a new-ish user to Linux at the time, was still quite an intimidating thing. So especially with back when it wasn't sort of as readily resources like YouTube weren't as readily available, and when you're sort of the only person that's sort of making this adventure into Linux, it's it's all, there's a lot of information, and you've got to discern the stuff that's relevant from the stuff that's not. And when you're not sort of familiar with how Linux does things, it can be pretty tricky. But there you go. It's all part of the learning, isn't it? Matru Zelef says, I would go back to Linux Mint again if they had an official GNOME desktop environment. I know you can install GNOME on Mint, but there would be complications because there isn't a specific build for it, obviously. Yeah. So that's yeah. I'm surprised they've got like XFCE builds and things like that. To be honest, the Ubuntu LTS of GNOME would probably be 99% the same. There's a few Mint tools, but in all honesty, the Mint tools aren't particularly groundbreaking. Generally all the stuff you need is available on pretty much all the distributions you need. At least sort of the big ones like Ubuntu and Arch and Mint. Caillou731 says, I love Mate. Yes, Mate is, again, one of my favorite desktop environments, but I do feel at this stage there's like so many. I don't know if like the GNOME Shell framework or whatever has made it just like so much easier to build new desktop environments. Or I don't, because I remember back in the day, there used to be GNOME and KDE for all your like big distributions, and then you might have had XFCE for like something a bit more lightweight, I guess, and possibly like a window manager below that, and then LXDE came along, and there you go. But yeah, I do love Mate. Mate is pretty good. It's nice. It's straightforward. It's what GNOME 2 would be like, if it was still around today. So that's about it. I'm going to move on to the next video now. There are a few other sort of decent comments on that one, but I want to kind of wrap up this video now. Of course, these videos are going to be quite rambly. And this one is particularly disjointed today. I'm probably going to spend some time editing it. But this one's going to probably be slightly disjointed because I'm using my tablet to look at the comments, which I have now decided is a great mistake, and I'll probably use a netbook or something instead. I got a cheap tablet just so that I could have access to Android and any necessary Android apps. I don't sort of like use it very much, but it's I like a keyboard, to be honest. Okay, so we have the review for Linux Mint Cinnamon, and this one seems to have had like quite a few more comments and quite a few more views, despite the fact that most of the bulk of the overall Mint review is on the other video. Some of you guys talk about hot corners. I shouted down hot corners. I was like, like who uses hot corners? Turns out quite a few of you use hot corners. And you know what? So do I. Right, at the moment, I'm not on a. I don't tend to use. I'm not on a composited desktop, and I use XFCE, so I don't have hot corners available to me right now. I could if I wanted to bring in a compositor, but I tend to want to. I tend to want to keep things as lightweight as possible. But yeah, like if I run a KDE desktop or I run a GNOME desktop, the ability to put just your mouse pointer in the corner of the screen and just have all your windows laid out in a nice fashion when you can see what each window has in it is amazing. It's a massive improvement to workflow. So and you can do that with hot corners in Cinnamon. You can do that with hot corners in KDE, and of course GNOME has it as part of its default. So yeah, I'm sorry to hot corners. I didn't mean to disregard you. What I meant is I don't see many people use them, but despite the fact that I do kind of use them, but it does feel like they were popular during the Windows. Might have been popular some time ago, and they sort of fell out of fashion as a fad. But like desktop widgets, although I don't know. Now you're going to tell me that I like desktop widgets. It's like, okay. Zanaris Falador says that I used to be a big proponent. I used to be a cheerleader for Linux Mint, and it's disappointing that that sort of enthusiasm seems to have waned. So okay, basically, I sort of replied to the comment specifically, but I kind of wanted to address this because a lot of subscribers came to this channel from a video where I talk about how much better Linux Mint is than Ubuntu. So considering that seems to be somewhat of a force behind the channel at some point, I'm going to sort of talk about this in a video here today now. So Linux Mint is still great. It's everything that it was, but it hasn't moved on much. And that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing because it means it's consistent. Linux Mint is, sort of almost like it's Windows XP for the current day. And it's really good. It's really polished. I did find that sort of nasty error where the borders went away from the Cinnamon desktop windows, which I don't know if they'll bring back or whether or not, but then, you just stick with the MintX theme or you find a theme that works. So that's, again, it's a nitpick, but again, I will assess newbie friendly distributions against sort of power user distributions differently. Like, I'm not going to criticize Arch for something like that, but I will criticize Linux Mint Cinnamon for something like that. The thing is with Mint, a great out-of-the-box experience as always. When I first used Mint, Mint was a lifesaver and I loved it, and it was great. First of all, I'm no longer in Mint's key demographic, which means I'm not going to get excited about the things that I'll get excited about. There is a very possibility that I'll come back to it as a daily driver because I like it, because it almost seems like Ubuntu in many ways is trying to pull away from Linux. It's trying to use its own sort of desktop layout. It's sort of kind of using its own apps, although it's going into it's decided to adopt the GNOME App Store. And Ubuntu seems to want to forge an identity for itself separate from Linux. And Linux Mint seems to re-Linuxify Ubuntu with a more Linuxy workflow. So, like, for example, the App Store. It's just a little bit more straightforward and a little less graphical and fancy and a little more down to business. A little more sort of the Linux mentality. So that's sort of how I feel about Linux Mint today. And it seems to be and you can install it on a machine. It's a very good one to set and forget as well. But the issue, I guess, or not that there is an issue, the reason I'm not as enthusiastic and outspoken and as much of a cheerleader for Mint as I used to be is because Mint isn't the only distribution to which those comments now apply. There was a time when I could point out Linux Mint as a distribution on its own. It had, it filled a niche, and it filled that niche very well. But the thing is, if you measure up something like Ubuntu Mint against Elementary, there's little in it. And then, of course, there are other like they've, with things like Manjaro and Antergos, they've made Arch Linux really user friendly as well now. So it's got to compete against that for the sort of the intermediate users, the users that want to go behind Ubuntu. Because to a point you can like Linux Mint attracted me because it was very, very user friendly and had a great out of the box experience, and that is great. But we've got to remember that most people's first introduction to Linux is just going to be stock Ubuntu. And stock Ubuntu is not that bad when it comes to user friendliness. But it almost feels like unless you've got a marketing campaign or a plan to go out and get more new users than Ubuntu, focusing on those users to me strikes me as being a bit more futile. So a lot of Linux Mint users, although probably are newbies, might have had that distribution recommended to them by a Linux Mint user. But also Linux Mint user base might be perhaps slightly more advanced than the new users that are switching to Ubuntu, but rather prefer the more Linuxy kind of community aspects to it and sort of want to engage with their Linux distribution a little more than you expected to from Ubuntu. Those are just thoughts, but I remember using Linux Mint as a power user as well, and it is quite good in that department. I love that the App Store has comments and a really good rate, or a decent rating system. It'd be nice if they perhaps maybe made it a bit easier for casual users to rate apps and things like that. It seems like people that are only particularly enthusiastic about certain apps are likely to leave comments. Maybe not. Maybe I'm being a bit overly cynical there, but anything that builds and expands that kind of comment system is definitely a good thing. So I think that's about it. I have left out a number of comments, but I've got to edit this video. There are actually like really long pauses where I wait for stuff to load on this tablet, which obviously I can't leave in there. And it's really late now, which kind of means I'm probably going to have to edit this tomorrow. And when you edit a video when you haven't just recorded it, you don't remember. Like I can remember places to look for what I want to cut out, and I've got an idea about how I want the sort of the video / this audio blog to come out. But when it's tomorrow and you've not thought about it anymore. So anyway, this is the new thing I'm doing. It's a bit more rambly. I talk about stuff. Mostly, it's going to be comments, a little bit about this channel, maybe the direction of the channel, what I want out of this channel. Maybe I'll make some corrections. I'll talk about maybe, what I'm doing in terms on other projects. For those of you that don't know, I run a YouTube channel where I talk about flags, youtube.com/funwithflags. That's worth a look. It's a newer project. But it's already got a few hundred subscribers, so I'm quite happy with that. And then, of course, there's a Reddit for this channel, which is r/Chris Ware Digital. And that's where I put some app pics there. I put stuff up on the subreddit that perhaps isn't enough to make it into its own video, or like if I see someone else's video that I think is really good and worth a look. What I will probably try and do is include stuff like that in this, where I'll talk about something that I've found that's that's a bit more casual and bundle stuff in a bit more together. Let me know how you think about this format. Let me know if you want it tightened up, or if there's anything you want me to specifically include. If there are any questions you want me to answer, feel free to leave them in the comment section of this video as well, because I'll also, in the next video of this, I will be discussing comments from this video as well. They could be long. To be honest, I covered like half a dozen or so videos today. I probably won't. I'll probably be doing a video like this, like maybe once a week, ideally. So that'd be covering like 2 or 3 videos perhaps, or maybe once a fortnight, 2 or 3 videos. Who knows? I'm going to try and nail down a schedule in the next few months and stick to it, but I've got to kind of work that out in practice rather than, and work out what days are kind of easier to fit it in with the schedule. So guys, thank you very much for watching. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Also, I'm going to plug my Twitter because that's kind of like another thing that I would do at the end of this video. And also, what I tend to do, I just tend to share links mostly of interesting stuff that I find, app pics, again, that stuff that wouldn't generally be enough to make it into its own video. But hopefully a lot of that stuff will kind of be coming into this as well. So anyway guys, thank you very much for watching. That's about it from me today. Until next time, I've been Chris Ware and you've been awesome. Take care now.